on the topic of what the Buddha taught. And we're going to be on this topic for a while. The sutras are basically all about what the Buddha taught. And as we discussed earlier, the sutras are quite voluminous, and he taught a lot. In actuality, of course, it's sort of a whole genre of writing that with people giving instructions about the Dharma that went on for centuries. And so they kind of overlap each other in different places and different topics are expounded. And yet there's a remarkable consistency in all of the sutra literature in that it's very much concerned with upright moral living, karma, getting good karma, not doing anything that would cause bad karma, detaching yourself from anything that would cause that would be harmful or cause bad repercussions. And last time we talked about the 8 streams of merit, which were the 5 refuges and basic virtuous kinds of things, the 5 precepts. And the whole idea, and then we also talked about the 5 cardinal virtues, faith and energy, mindfulness, wisdom, and such. And all of this is to develop within us a sense of detachment. And it really detaching ourselves not from a life in general, or even worldly life or secular life or everyday life. That is not particularly essential, because you can be a practitioner whether you're a householder or you're somebody living out in the woods in robes as a monk or nun. That part is fine. It's more conducive to meditation to be out in the forest than to be a householder. But in terms of virtue, you can practice virtue in either place. And the whole thing is that you're only renouncing neurosis. You're only renouncing your bad habits, your non-virtues, your dispositions to just do things that are not constructive. And they're very specific in enumerating what these are. We'll be covering what those are. And so that's the kind of detachment the Buddha's looking for. He's looking for this kind of detachment from any kind of neurosis. And so that leaves you very sober, sane practitioner. It also leaves you with some kind of settled state, so that you're not anxious, you're not worried, you're not fearful, you're not hopeful, you're not grasping. All the kinds of neurotic tendencies that we have all result from feeding our neurosis in various ways through certain kinds of habits and conditioning we have. So that is the general theme that we were on as far as the beginning of what the Buddha taught. And we'll just sort of continue reading various sutras that just reinforce all of these teachings and provide some fresh detail. So we're going to start tonight with a selection. This is on page 166 of the textbook that some of you might have. The one that's in the Buddha's words, called Merit, the Key to Good Fortune. This is a short little passage, but it's a very important idea to get to grasp here. Called Meritorious Deeds. Monks do not fear meritorious deeds. This is an expression denoting happiness, what is desirable, wished for, dear, and agreeable. That is, meritorious deeds. For I know full well, monks, that for a long time I experienced desirable, wished for, dear, and agreeable results from often performing meritorious deeds. Having cultivated for 7 years a mind of loving kindness, for 7 eons of contraction and expansion, I did not return to this world. Whenever the eon contracted, I reached the plane of streaming radiance, and whenever the eon expanded, I arose in empty divine mansion. And there I was, Brahma, the great Brahma, the unvanquished victor, the all-seeing, the all-powerful. 36 times I was Sakya, ruler of the Devas. And many hundreds of times I was a wheel-turning monarch, a righteous, a king of righteousness, a conqueror of the 4 regions of the earth, maintaining stability in the land, in possession of the 7 treasures. What need is there to speak of mere local kingships? It occurred to me, monks, to wonder, of what kind of deed of mine is this the fruit? Of what deed ripening am I now of such great accomplishment and power? And then it occurred to me, it is the fruit of 3 kinds of deeds of mine, the ripening of 3 kinds of deeds that I am now of such great accomplishment and power. Deeds of giving, deeds of self-mastery, and deeds of refraining. So here we have the Buddha in a very boastful mood, talking of how that once he realized how merit worked, he was able to accumulate such merit that on his way to Buddhahood, he enjoyed many lives in very prominent ways. And then finally he achieved full Buddhahood, and all of this success in his practice, in his rebirth, in his ability to help others is due to 3 things. One is that he's generous and always gives and looks for opportunities to give. The second is that he's a master of himself. And that refers to having a sense of a moral discipline. He's the master of his body, speech, and mind, and commits no non-virtues of body, speech, and mind. And he's also the other great accomplishment. One is the moral discipline, one is the generosity, and the third key to merit and good fortune is refraining. And then if you start to wonder, well, what does he mean by refraining? The very next selection says, there are, O monks, 3 ways of making merit. What 3? There are ways of making merit by giving, by moral discipline, and by the development of meditation. So his idea of the idea of refraining is the meditation. Is what are you refraining? You're refraining from chasing after the contents of your mind, reacting to the contents of your mind. You're just allowing the contents of your mind to be as they are, which is the basis of our meditation practice. And that is refraining. It's refraining from reacting and any kind of reactivity where you're just impulsively jumping on something one way or another. So that's very typical Buddha. Any comments or questions so far?
So it's so just that refraining, like refraining has other meanings. I feel like that's consistent with like how inhibition or inhibitory control or executive function in the brain. It's like just noticing a I don't know.
And not joining any not impulsively jumping on your thoughts.
Yeah.
That idea. It's also a sense of moving and getting involved in things in a certain kind of way. Then again, it's really only talking about non-meritorious things that you're trying to curb. You don't really have to curb yourself from meritorious things. In fact, he begins, interestingly enough, he begins that section by saying, monks, do not be afraid of meritorious acts. In fact, it was meritorious acts that enabled me to be a Buddha, enabled me to have all these positive rebirths that, I was in all these situations where I was to be generous in one way or another, giving of myself, or my resources or whatever it took to be helpful. And through that kind of generosity, from being, practicing a full morality of harmlessness, and by not being impulsive with respect to meditation and life in general. Those are the things that are working toward it to increase his merit. The Sokuzan in the Zen Temple in Battle Creek talks about, I tell the students, don't do anything unless you have to, which is an interesting instruction about refraining. I thought rather severe refraining, actually. Don't do anything unless you have to. But it's also rather ambiguous. If you think, well, what do you have to do and what do you don't have to do? I mean, you don't have to get out of bed in the morning, or do you? If you don't get out of bed in the morning, you get bed sores, but you still have to get out of bed in the morning. You don't have to eat, but if you don't eat. So, you'd be surprised that, most of what you do have to do. But there are some choices.
The three deeds, do you think those is that where like the six perfections came from in the Mahayana?
Well, they seem to be an early version of that. Is headed in that direction, because you've got the patience in a way is a type of refraining, is it not? I mean, whenever somebody's telling you to be patient, they're telling you not to do anything. I think just let it be. So in a way, you've got generosity, morality, and patience in those three meritorious things, to which they've added meditation, which he already assumes that you're doing, and wisdom, which he assumes that you've got too. So the only three things that it's the first three of the five paramitas that are the cause of the merit that leads to successful meditation and wisdom. Of course, there's effort in there too, and that's not mentioned in this one.
So does Sokuzan say that like as a it's like if every situation comes up and you're like, do I have to do this? It's like a fresh take on it. It kind of wakes you up to whatever you're about to do. Is that maybe an implicit idea?
Well, first of all, he's instructing people who are in a situation where they're meditating and they're sort of in a Dharma center. So in those sorts of situations, you definitely don't want to be doing anything you don't have to do. Out in the, our situation, I mean, it's more ambiguous. Yeah, I imagine it's somewhat ambiguous where they are. I mean, if you're retired, you have a lot of free time, so it's not really anything that I take to heart. But I think you do hard in the sense that I don't do anything. I mean, I do what I want to do, what I feel inspired to do. And I do something that I feel I have to do. But I don't really, things that you have to do aren't really better than things that you're inspired to do. In fact, they may be better, but the things that you're inspired to are, more enjoyable than certain kinds of things that you have to do. Like if you have to go to the grocery store, or you don't like going to the grocery store, maybe you have to go get the oil changed on the car. I mean, it's not something you would choose to do. not like that much fun.
Right.
Or if it needs to condition, it's even less fun. So I think so. But then there are, again, and remember, the interesting thing about the Buddha is he's not trying to get people to curtail all their actions. He's just trying to get them to curtail their unprofitable actions, or actions that aren't helping anyone, themselves or others. Those kinds of impulses he's trying to get people to refrain from. And now, as far as good impulses go, that's what we're looking for. Well, let me go on to the next reading here, because then I'll continue in the vein and start. We're just sort of filling in a kind of a picture of the ethics here that the Buddha is teaching. This is his analysis of the Eightfold Path. So the basic Buddhist teaching is that you have the Four Noble Truths. So whenever, you have to give an explanation of Buddhism, you start with the Four Noble Truths. That's where the Buddha started. So the first noble truth, the truth of suffering is the motivation. And of course, suffering is the source of great discussion in terms of the 8 kinds of suffering, the suffering of birth, old age, sickness, and death. And these are quite elaborated on and can be meditated on in great detail. But the whole thing is that suffering is a motivator. We don't like to suffer. We're afraid of dying. And death gets closer every day. And so we want to have some sense of knowing what's going on as we hit these situations. And so the first thing is to get that point clear as to how pervasive suffering is for everyone, no matter what they have, whether they're good looking, whether they're young, whether they're rich, whether they're famous or infamous. All people have the same kind of basic sort of human issues that they have to contend with. And of course, a lot of the suffering is due to the extent of our grasping or desire. So if somebody is very ambitious and causing all kinds of trouble, then they make all kinds of suffering for themselves. And you can see that we make suffering for ourselves too, just by chasing after things that really aren't that good for us. And the third noble truth is that there is a way to liberate ourselves from this situation. And then the fourth noble truth is that there's the path. So the path is the Eightfold Path. And this is the teaching on the Eightfold Path. So you realize that things are not so good, but you realize it's within your power to do something about it. And that's, again, the whole idea of refraining. Why is refraining so powerful? Because you aren't fueling your habitual bad habits. And here's how he's going to put you on the path to liberation, the Eightfold Path. And the sutra reads, "Monks, I will teach you the Noble Eightfold Path, and I will analyze it for you. Listen and attend closely. I will speak." "Yes, Venerable Sir," those monks replied. The Blessed One said thus, "For what, monks, is the Noble Eightfold Path? Right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration." This is on page 239. And what, monks, is right view? Knowledge of suffering, knowledge of the origin of suffering, knowledge of the cessation of suffering, knowledge of the way leading to the cessation of suffering. This is called right view. So the very first one is, in fact, the knowledge of the Four Noble Truths. Knowing the Four Noble Truths completely, thoroughly, believing in it, understanding it to be, in fact, true, how it's true in our life, how it's true in everyone's life. That's right view. And that's sort of the foundation of the path, is understanding things as they are in that way. And then he says, and what, monks, is right intention? It's the intention of renunciation, the intention of non-ill will, the intention of harmlessness. This is called right intention. So the intention to act in a moral way, to not further the suffering of the world, to be harmless, to not extend ill will to others, to renounce our own whatever harmfulness or lack of healthfulness that there is within us. That is the right intention in response to the understanding of the noble truths. So that's the next thing. First we understand, then we develop the right intention of how we should act according to that understanding. And then he goes on, what, monks, is right speech? Right speech is abstinence from false speech, abstinence from malicious speech, abstinence from harsh speech, and abstinence from idle chatter. So those are the four types of speech that we want to pull away from, that are considered harmful, that are not quite helpless in terms of that are eating up our merit rather than, and that is lying, speaking derogatorily, harshly, and idle chatter. So obviously, all of these things that are prohibited have their virtue corollaries. We'll come back to that. So yeah, right speech is abstinence from those four kinds of things, which, and then there is a, when one thinks of bad, somebody who violates that, of course, the president of the United States, Trump, is, he lies, he's malicious, he's harsh, and when he's not doing that, he's just talking foolishness. So he pretty much hits all four buttons right there. There's a great sutra, which it's just very funny. Somebody is guilty of bad speech. He's doing all these things, doesn't care about it, and the Buddha tries to warn him, but he doesn't pay any attention. And then boils break over the person's body, and he dies this horrible, grueling death. And then they said, well, what happened to him? He said, well, his speech was so bad, it just created this poison in the system, and it boiled over, and it killed him. And they said, well, where is he now? And they said, oh, he's going through the hell realms. And then it goes on for 10 pages of descriptions about what this guy is suffering because of his bad speech. So we won't get to watch that video, but it'll be interesting if that works out for Mr. Trump. So that's bad right speech, is abstinence from those kinds of bad things. And then we go, and what, monks, is right action? Abstinence from the destruction of life, abstinence from taking what is not given, abstinence from sexual misconduct. That's right action. So you can see how the 10 virtues, or the 10 non-virtues that you're to avoid, are right built into the Eightfold Path. In other words, you don't have the non-virtues of speech, you don't have the non-virtues of body. That's right speech and right action. Also, the non-virtues of view, you have right view, right understanding, right intention. So all the precepts are included in the Eightfold Path in that kind of way. And the next one goes, and what, monks, is right livelihood? Here, a noble disciple, having abandoned a wrong mode of livelihood, earns his living by a right livelihood. This is called right livelihood. Now here it's not specific, and obviously there are certain things that are standard per the ancient Buddhist teachings. That is, that you don't trade in arms, you don't become a butcher and kill things to make a living. You don't do anything where you don't do anything where you violate body, speech, or mind prohibitions above. So you can't be in a profession where you're lying all the time, or harming other people, or running a brothel, or all sorts of anything that's causing any kind of harm is off limits. And that's because that's just going to, again, damage your karma. And in the early days, I mean, in the days when they're talking about this, they're very fervent believers in karmic justice after death. So if you have a good life and you do good things and you're generous and you do all these virtuous things and you help other people and you're then you look forward to being born in the realm of the gods. And if otherwise you're a scoundrel and you're just causing trouble all the time for people and continually committing all these non-virtuous actions, then things do not go well at all for you. And they take that pretty seriously. Although today we consider it, sort of archaic to use threats of the afterlife as a way of encouraging good moral behavior. But they weren't so afraid of that. Next we get to what monks is right effort. Here amongst a monk generates desire for the non-arising of unarisen evil, wholesome states. He makes an effort, arouses energy, applies his mind, and strives. He generates desire for abandoning the arisen evil wholesome states. He generates desire for the arising of unarisen wholesome states, so forth and so on. Basically, and that's too wordy to read at all, you desire what's good and you stop desiring things that are bad for you. So if you arouse yourself towards the good and arouse yourself away from the bad. And you're looking for wholesome states, not unwholesome states. And so you're really watching your state of mind very carefully, very mindfully, with a lot of awareness. And things that are just not helpful, you just don't go there. So the next one is right mindfulness. What monks is right mindfulness? And of course, here you get the 4 foundations of mindfulness, which we'll talk about later. But basically, being mindful of the body, being mindful of feelings, being mindful of sensations, and being mindful sort of your basic life impulse, and also of your mind. And so then the last one is right concentration. And in this particular version of right concentration, we are talking about the jhana states, the 4 jhana states. I'll just read that and we'll touch on it a little bit. What monks is right concentration? Here monks secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states. So you've gotten rid of through your moral discipline, your virtuous activity of body, speech, and mind. You have really settled your life down so that you only have good feeling. You're not troubled by anything. You're not troubled by any unwholesomeness at all. And now you're ready to do some serious meditation, which is what the Buddha really cares about. And here he says, a monk enters and dwells in the first jhana, which is accomplished by thought and examination, with rapture and happiness born as seclusion. So the first of these meditative absorptions or meditative states that you can reach when you've really calmed your life down is the one where you just see everything very clearly, very analytically. It's kind of a free exercise of prajna, a free exercise of discriminating awareness. You see everything very clearly, and you can discriminate between one thing and the next, and you can examine everything and think about everything, and very happy as you make all these discoveries. So that's the first jhana, which is includes discursive thinking and conceptuality, but of a happy sort. And then, as it says, with the subsiding of thought and examination, the practitioner enters and dwells in the second jhana, which has internal confidence and unification of mind, is without thought and examination, as rapture and happiness. So you drop the discursive thought in the second jhana. That's non-conceptual. You feel confident, you feel unified, you're rapturous, and you're happy. And that's you're very present, and it's a kind of a blissful state. And then the third one, there's a fading away of rapture, and you just dwell on equanimity, mindful and clearly comprehending, and you experience just happiness. So there's a great happiness and joy in the third one without the kind of the rapture of the second jhana. It's more settled. And the fourth one is even more settled yet. You don't even particularly need the happiness. You just, there's neither pain nor pleasure, and there's this complete equanimity. And that's the highest of the meditation states that make right concentration. Of course, right concentration is sort of at one time it's the culmination of the whole life practice, the culmination of all your meditation practice, and yet it's still a samadhi. So from the Dzogchen point of view, it's not that stateless, natural awareness that just always permeates everything that you could wake up to any moment. But as a meditative attainment, it's the ultimate in focused or concentrated meditation. So we'll stop there on the reading. That's the Eightfold Path. So that's what the Buddha wants to see us do. That's his solution to suffering. And that is to understand how things are set up, intend that we're going to be virtuous and aware, clean up our body, speech, and mind, adopt a right livelihood, work towards being, put our efforts into being virtuous, and become mindful, and adept at meditation. So, any questions or comments?
The question I have is between right mindfulness and right concentration. I feel like right concentration is like shamatha. Is right mindfulness more of a vipassana, or is that not a? Is the vipassana or insight aspect? I mean, because I feel like what's set.
No, the other way around. The meditation, the mindfulness and meditation are settling down.
Okay.
That's the kind of shamatha, is you're just quieting your mind, emptying your mind, quieting your mind. And so it's a result of your focus through your meditation practice. And mindfulness is just part of being focused. And focus is, if you're focused, you're mindful. And if you're mindful, you're focused. So they kind of go hand in hand. But wisdom or concentration, which later becomes wisdom in Mahayana, the prajna, this right concentration is a kind of, in terms of the jhana states are all vipassana type states. They're not shamatha states. Because the first one is a analytical awareness of everything, which is, classic prajna part, your discriminating awareness, wisdom, right? Mm. The second jhana is that you lose the discursiveness that you just, intuitively understand, and or just abide in bliss. And the third one is that you settle down from, being blissful all the time and are just normal, happy, cheerful. and helpful. And then in the last one, you don't particularly even have the requirement to be happy or not happy. You just are. You're just everything just is. So those are very subtle Vipassana states. To have that last state where everything just is, and it's a very vast state. Happiness, you think about it, clarity, which is the first jhana, rapture, which is the second, happiness, which is the third. There's all a me in there. My clarity, my bliss, my happiness. Only in the fourth one do you really let go of the self, and then there's just space awareness. And space awareness is always in a perfect state of equanimity, evenness, unchangeability, immutability.
So, but as like absorptions, are you absorbed in that?
That's your experience. Absorption doesn't have the right, although it's commonly used because it's slightly pejorative, and it's also, at the time the Buddha is talking about, and they're actually experiences. He's not abusing absorption in the way that's later used by Mahayana or Dzogchen as something where you're within the causal realm. Although actually, the jhana states are within the realm of cause and effect. They're the cause of, intense, successful meditation practice. To have that kind of, those kinds of high states of Vipassana awareness. Mm-hmm. And there's even higher ones. They go on from the fourth jhana, then has 4 other special states. Infinite consciousness, infinite state, neither perception or non-perception, that kind of thing. So they're just very, very subtle. Your awareness can get very subtle.
Those are only 6, right? See?
Right.
Thank you.
I think there's 8. That's just sad that we label them. When you talk to right livelihood, that seemed to be more for the lay person or something. Would he be talking about monks as well in that?
Well, the monks, it's easy for the monk to have right livelihood because that's the highest in that world. The renunciate life is the highest life. It's the highest livelihood. It even surpasses that of a Brahmin. Everybody in India, one has to remember, has a very strong sense of duty and responsibility, and you're in one of these castes, so you have to. It's all about the you have in this world. So if you're a warrior, then you have to be a good warrior. If you're a Brahmin, a priest, you're a good priest. If you're a good worker, you're a good worker. If you're a good farmer, you'll be a good farmer. And then, of course, there were these people that didn't even make that a caste system. But everybody's got this idea. So if you're going to be a monk, that's like even higher than a Brahmin because you've renounced the world. You're by not being involved in worldly things, by devoting yourself completely to liberation. That's the highest kind of livelihood. The best. What is livelihood? It's how you use your time. So the best use of your time is to be meditating and practicing. That's the highest form of livelihood. and then that creates the most merit. Because as giving is great, and all the other disciplines are great, but the merit really starts to accumulate when your meditation practice goes well, and also when you start having these insights into reality. There's a lot of, I didn't read the text tonight, but there are texts that talk about how, one moment of insight is worth, 1,000 offerings of gold to the Buddhas and stuff, things like that.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
So that's interesting to hear that point of context about the life of the monk being the highest way of earning a living, and that the highest thing you could be doing is sitting around meditating all the time, because that's where I would say I run into a pretty stout cultural difference, being brought up on the Protestant work ethic. The idea that having somebody sit around, internally processing, being, and not, quote, doing anything, not working, seems profoundly, contradictory. So that's just an interesting, it's just a real different culture that would hold that as the highest standard.
Yeah, it's a time period difference more than cultural. I mean, we're in this postmodern age, and in the modern age was not much, is no better, but they're back in a time period where if you don't renounce the world, you're pretty well caught up in it. I mean, you're a part of these big, your big families. Everybody's working all the time. You've got all these relatives. It's crowded as could be. It's very busy. You have no time to yourself, and your life expectancy is about 35 years. And it's if you don't renounce, if you lead the life of a householder, it's not that you can't, very certain circumstances, be able to progress spiritually and find some time to meditate and practice and so forth, and cultivate yourself. It's just in that particular culture, at that particular time, there's really no leisure. The only leisure you're going to get, the only chance you're going to get any space to do anything is to not get caught up in the whole worldly situation. You have to imagine again, villages and having 100 relatives, and it's quite a web. And you're married off when you're teenager.
14.
You're producing kids like crazy, and you're dying in your 35. I mean, it's pretty wild. It's not at all going to have any competitive opportunity. I mean, if you like to eat and propagate, it's really good. But I mean, other than that, it's not going to help you contemplatively at all. So that's why the renunciate life is prized. But we're in a situation that's quite a bit different. I mean, we're in Europe and North America and many parts, developed parts of the world. We have ample leisure time. The whole condition of life is much better. We live for a long time. We have many years of retirement. It's not that, you're not quite under the gun in the way they were. And you can actually be a householder and also pursue other interests, including meditation. But that's a fairly recent modern thing. Before the 20th century, or at least the 19th century, you wouldn't have had that much time to have this, be a householder and also be a great, do a lot of meditation.
Well, okay.
But at the same time, there's just a tremendous stress on virtue. And here's where the householder has an advantage. because the householder who develops a virtuous life, first of all, the chance for him to develop a virtuous life is way more impressive than a monk developing a virtuous life. But if you're out in the woods, I mean, what are you going to do? I mean, grow trees. I mean, it's not any. You're just away from everything. But a householder, somebody who's really in the world, is dealing with moral situations, all sorts of situations all the time. And so to be virtuous in the midst of all that is a much greater test of one's character. And similarly, you can benefit people so much more when you're a householder. You have so much more opportunity for generosity, for helping people, and so forth and so on, and then more than a monk does. So on the moral level, on that, which is very important as the foundation for Buddhism, the householder actually has the advantage. You would think the monk has the advantage because he's not committing bad karma. And in that sense, it's true, but he doesn't have that much opportunity to create merit in the way that a householder does. But as far as having time to meditate, the renunciate definitely has the better deal there.
Is that one of the reasons that Tantra sprung up? I know we're kind of skipping ahead a little bit here, but did Tantra spring up as kind of for householders, like a quicker way, a more powerful way to get to enlightenment because they didn't have as much time in the ashram as a monk?
Well, yes, the idea that I'm going on, it really does it, because in the early view, it's quite clear the renunciate has the upper hand. I mean, the householder, he's encouraged to be virtuous, and then maybe in the next life he'll be born a monk and finish it up. But by the time you get to Mahayana, it's way down the road for us here, the conduct aspect becomes more important. So things like what I just said, as a householder, you have more chance to do good things, and your virtue is more hard won. That's much more a Mahayana idea, obviously. And then in Tantra, it goes even further that you have the opportunity as a householder and somebody engaged in the world to take all these worldly energies and use them as the energy to fuel your it's a fuel for your transformative energies. You need energy to transform energy, and worldly situations generate all kinds of energy through the three poisons that you can then transform into a virtue. And so the very wickedness and density and power of those negative energies then can become harnessed to your benefit. So then the householder path becomes the only path. You can't be a monk and practice Tantra. You have to be out in the world to do that one. So yeah, it does switch around as things go on. But part of it is not so much, it's also an expansion. If only renunciates can win in liberation, it's going to be a rare event for a few rare people. Where in the Mahayana, everybody engaged in the world has a chance to be virtuous, and you open it up a lot. And then in Tantra, you open it up even more. So it's an increasing democratization of the whole thing, so that more people can participate, whatever their station of life.
In one of the lists of things here, one mention was non-ill will, which seems like that's just, if you look at like social media and things like that, it's just sort of like ballooned or something. So, I mean, can you say something about non-ill will and sort of how to practice it?
Yeah, it has to do with it's also the flip side of non-ill will is loving kindness. So the actual practice is the practice of loving kindness. I mean, really, at some point you need to flip these over and look at the virtues, which is, yeah, obviously we could feel, but most of us have that figured out, pretty early in life. But generosity and becoming how we can increase our generosity as a human being, that's something we could take the rest of our lives to learn. Similarly, a few of us kill things, even animals or, maybe occasionally insects that we get in the house, but learning how to, nourish life, that's again something that's a lifelong. So the virtues are lifelong things that can be cultivated. The things that you're not supposed to do can be knocked out of your life fairly quickly if you're so inclined. But to cultivate the virtues, that's what takes a lifetime to I mean, there's no end to how virtuous one can be in terms of patience and generosity, and so you don't want to be thinking ill of anyone, wishing them ill. Instead, you want to practice loving kindness towards friends, towards strangers, towards enemies. And of course, it's the loving kindness towards enemies that is the sort of the pinnacle of loving kindness, because it goes against our normal inclination to. But you have to look at your mind. That's an area of mindfulness. And it's interesting because as you read about politics, and I have local politics and there's national politics, and then maybe family situations, and there may be work situations. I mean, there's all different kinds of things that where you feel ill towards people. You get angry at people because of their behavior. And it gives us ample material to work with, just to purify our emotions, to purify our feelings, so that we actually do not have any bad feelings towards anyone. And it's possible, it's quite possible.
I guess that just stood out because of, again, that just the way social media in the modern time seems everybody's really confrontational and, getting real personal over politics or things like that. And so I just thought it was, we get like poisoned by it, even though we may not have that ill will ourselves. We are surrounded with it.
Well, yeah, people are making, people trying to get you to, trying to push your buttons and give them money or vote for them or do something. Remember how they're like, and they have to get you angry because that's a good motivator. You gotta, and you have to, watch your mind and when you get angry, what you're angry at, and who you're angry at. I mean, being angry at situations is not a problem so much, but individuals and condemning them and demonizing them and so forth. I mean, it doesn't have any, again, it's not an intellectual thing. I mean, intellectually, you can be quite aware that, say, the President of the United States is a total jerk. But it's your feeling that you're monitoring here. I mean, I don't have any personal animosity or ill feeling. I mean, I recognize that, but you can purge yourself of any ill feeling toward anyone, even if they're, people like Bill Cosby or Donald Trump or I don't know, whoever.
And that's
having personal animosity towards people is a fault. It's never a virtue.
And that's right intention.
People are not clear about that, obviously.
It's
That's a little, that is a little confusing because there are, you know, that's a hard, I guess that's a love thy enemy business part. I mean, because people who harm other beings, people who deliberately hurt other people, because for whatever reason, you know, obviously one can always state it's a point of confusion or insanity or, I mean, whatever. I mean, you know.
No, you're not excusing them in the slightest. You recognize completely what they are, and it doesn't mean that you don't feel it. And they may not need to be separated from human beings, perhaps for a long period of time, in a confined setting such as a penitentiary. But you can quite, but you don't have to hate somebody to put them in a penitentiary. You just put them in a penitentiary because that's where they need to be. What we have to watch is how we let our feelings get involved in these situations, not just our clarity. Clearly, we can see who's a scoundrel and who's not, and see as to what would be the appropriate place for such a scoundrel to be. And one place is to not be in a position of power. So the first thing you do is got to get the scoundrels out of power. Then, as far as separating them from other people in a penitential situation, that's, if you're lucky, you can go after that. And that's like local politics. I have to get them out of office first. Then, if I can get somebody to jail, and that's even better. But holding my breath on the latter one. At the same time, if I let my feelings get involved in it to the extent that I have a personal grudge or some personal animosity, that level, that's a failure, that's a fault. Because that's actually hurting my effectiveness. What's going to help my effectiveness is just total clarity and dispassion.
So this non-ill will and loving kindness is right intention. And so that just clarifies, Don brought up social media and arguing about politics. And it's like any situation, what's the motivation and intention for, the speech and action that comes out of it? If it's to be right or something like that, and if that's more important than, having just kindness for other people, then things will go astray. But if the primary intention is just to be kind, then probably things will work out better. I mean,
which doesn't mean at some point you'll be kind to somebody and they'll beat you and steal your wallet. Most of the time it works out much better. Well, we have reached that magic hour, so I'm going to... Are there any further questions before we dedicate merit? I wish you all a virtuous week. I have it go.
You too.
You too.
Well, by this merit, may all obtain auditions. May defeat the enemy wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birthful days, from the ocean of sorrow, may I free all beings.
Thank you, Bruce.
Well, thank you all for joining us, and we'll
Thank you.
Continue next week. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Bruce.
Thank you, Bruce.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody.
Very much, Bruce.
Have a good
Good
week,
night.
Good
everyone.
night.
So long.
See you on Sunday.